Who's that black kid trying to fix a $250,000 Rolls-Royce in the pouring rain? The whispers followed Marcus as he approached the stranded luxury car. Nobody expected a struggling engineering student to have the skills to fix what specialized mechanics couldn't. But when billionaire Alexander Thornton saw the distinctive tattoo on Marcus's neck, identical to his own, his world came crashing down. "Where did you get this?" he asked hoarsely, staring at the old photograph Marcus had placed on his desk. What shocking connection could link a broke black student and one of the world's wealthiest men? Find out in this heartbreaking story of separation, prejudice, and unexpected reunion that will leave you questioning everything about family and second chances. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson winced as he leaned against the wall at the back of the lecture hall. The hard wooden benches of Westfield Tech University's engineering building were a daily torment for his injured back. 6 months had passed since the incident with Professor Winters, but the pain remained, both physical and emotional. "Mr. Johnson, is standing at the back of my classroom your new hobby?" Professor Reynolds called out, pausing his lecture on thermodynamics. "Sorry, sir." "Medical reasons," Marcus replied quietly, feeling the familiar weight of stares from his classmates. Professor Reynolds nodded curtly before continuing. Unlike Professor Winters, at least he didn't push the issue. Marcus shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable position. At 22, he shouldn't have to deal with chronic back pain, but here he was, unable to sit for more than 15 minutes without searing pain shooting through his lower spine. "Probably just looking for attention," whispered Bryce Coleman to his friends in the front row. The wealthy legacy student never missed an opportunity to comment on Marcus's unusual classroom habits. Marcus ignored the whispers. As one of only 7 black students in Westfield's prestigious engineering program, he'd grown accustomed to standing out, though not by choice. Between working 30 hours weekly at Hank's auto shop and maintaining his 3.8 GPA, Marcus barely had time to notice the social politics of university life. When class ended, Marcus waited for the room to clear before gathering his notes. His scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, and he couldn't afford to miss his shift at the garage. "Johnson," Professor Reynolds called as Marcus headed for the door. "A moment." Marcus approached warily. "Yes, sir. Your last paper on fuel injection systems was exceptional. Have you considered applying for the Thornton Innovation Fellowship? The deadline's next week." The prestigious fellowship sponsored by tech billionaire Alexander Thornton offered full funding and industry connections, a golden ticket in the engineering world. "Thank you, sir, but I don't think that's for me." Marcus knew the unspoken truth: those fellowships went to well-connected students like Bryce, not scholarship kids who worked at auto shops. Professor Reynolds frowned. "Don't sell yourself short. You have remarkable talent." Outside, dark clouds gathered over campus as Marcus headed toward the bus stop. His back throbbed in protest after standing through the 3-hour lecture. The medication he could barely afford provided minimal relief. Rain began to fall as Marcus checked his watch. If he missed the 3:15 bus, he'd be late for his shift at Hank's. Another late arrival might cost him the job he desperately needed, the job that kept a roof over his head and food on his table while he pursued the engineering degree his mother had always dreamed he'd earn. Lightning flashed across the sky as Marcus ran toward the bus stop, ignoring the pain that shot through his spine with each step. Some days, he wondered if the sacrifice was worth it. But then he'd remember his mother's words before cancer took her 2 years ago: "Education is the one thing they can never take from you." So he kept running, through the rain, through the pain, toward a future he could only hope existed beyond the daily struggle. The memory returned without warning, vivid and sharp as the day it happened. Marcus had been sitting in the front row of advanced mechanical engineering, eager to make a good impression on Professor Catherine Winters, whose industry connections were legendary. Westfield's only female engineering professor was known for her brilliance and her brutality, characteristics that had earned her both fear and respect among the student body. The traditional combustion engine cannot be significantly improved upon, Professor Winters had declared, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone used to being challenged. All meaningful advancements will come through electric alternatives. Marcus had raised his hand, heart pounding. Professor, I've been researching modifications that could improve combustion efficiency by nearly 30% using recirculated exhaust gases with a specialized catalyst. The classroom had fallen silent. No one questioned Professor Winters. Mr. Johnson, she'd said coldly, first-year students shouldn't interrupt with half-baked ideas they picked up in some garage. Murmurs of laughter rippled through the classroom. It's not half-baked, Professor, Marcus had persisted, pulling out his notebook filled with calculations and diagrams. I've tested a prototype that, enough. Professor Winters had slammed her hand on the desk, marching toward Marcus with fury in her eyes. Stand up. Confused, Marcus had complied. What happened next occurred so quickly that many students later claimed not to have seen it clearly. As Marcus stood, Professor Winters swung her heavy engineering textbook, striking him across the lower back with surprising force. This is what happens when you waste my time with garage fantasies instead of proven science, she'd shouted as Marcus collapsed back into his seat, pain radiating through his spine. The class had gasped collectively. Professor, that's assault, a brave student had called out. But Professor Winters had simply returned to the front of the room. Mr. Johnson chose to disrupt my classroom with nonsense. Perhaps now he'll think twice. That afternoon, Marcus had filed a formal complaint with Dean Harrison. The meeting still played in his mind on endless loop. Professor Winters claims you were disruptive and disrespectful, Dean Harrison had said, not looking up from the complaint form. She admits to tapping you with her book to regain classroom order. She hit me hard enough to injure my back, Marcus had insisted. There were 20 witnesses. None of whom have come forward, the dean had noted. And Professor Winters' research brings considerable funding to Westfield. These are serious allegations against a distinguished faculty member. 2 days later, Marcus received a brief email. After thorough investigation, insufficient evidence exists to support claims of inappropriate physical contact. Case closed. The University Medical Center had diagnosed a muscular strain and prescribed rest and painkillers, neither of which Marcus could afford with his workload. When the pain persisted, a community clinic had identified a slipped disc, but the recommended physical therapy remained beyond his financial reach. Now, 6 months later, Marcus still couldn't sit properly. He'd adapted, standing in classes, lying on his side to study in his apartment, and finding the least painful positions to work under cars at Hanks. His friend Darius had urged him to sue, but legal battles required money and connections, 2 things Marcus lacked. More importantly, they required time, which his packed schedule between work and classes simply didn't allow. So Marcus endured, standing at the back of lecture halls, carrying the invisible burden of injustice alongside the very visible burden of chronic pain. In his lowest moments, he wondered if this was preparation for life as a black engineer in America, having to work twice as hard while carrying weights others couldn't see or chose not to recognize. But he never missed a class. And he never sat in Professor Winters' classroom again. Marcus, get over here and take a look at this. Hank's booming voice carried across the garage floor where Marcus was finishing an oil change on a modest Honda Civic. Wiping grease from his hands, Marcus made his way to the far corner where Hank Smith, owner of Hank's Auto Shop and Marcus's unofficial mentor for the past 2 years, stood puzzling over the exposed engine of a BMW M5. What do you make of this? Hank asked, stepping aside. At 62, with salt and pepper hair and hands permanently stained with motor oil, Hank was the closest thing to family Marcus had left. As one of the few black-owned auto shops in the area, Hank's place had become Marcus's sanctuary, a place where his knowledge was respected rather than dismissed. Marcus leaned in, examining the engine. Within moments, he spotted the problem. The timing's off by a fraction, and there's a hairline crack in the intake manifold. Probably why it's running rich and misfiring. Hank shook his head in amazement. Took me 20 minutes to figure that out, and you see it in 20 seconds. BMW Service Center couldn't even diagnose it. Marcus shrugged. Just patterns. Everything speaks if you know how to listen. Boy, you got a gift. Don't waste it standing in the back of classrooms getting disrespected by professors who couldn't change their own oil if their lives depended on it. Marcus smiled weakly. Hank knew about the Professor Winters incident, had even offered to have a word with her, which Marcus had firmly declined. Let me finish up Mrs. Chen's Honda, then I'll help with this, Marcus said, returning to his previous task. The garage was busy, as usual on Friday afternoons. Customers from all walks of life trusted Hank with vehicles ranging from battered pickup trucks to luxury sedans. What had started as a desperate job application 2 years ago had evolved into something more meaningful. Marcus had found not just employment but education in this garage. Hey, college boy, called Devin, the youngest mechanic besides Marcus. There's a customer asking for you specifically. Says you're the only one who understands his vintage Mustang. Marcus recognized Mr. Reeves as he approached, a retired history teacher who'd preserved his 1968 Mustang for decades. Marcus, my boy. Mr. Reeves greeted warmly. She's making that noise again when I accelerate past 40. Probably the carburetor adjustment we talked about last time, Marcus replied, already mentally diagnosing the issue. Give me an hour. While other mechanics relied on computer diagnostics, Marcus possessed an almost supernatural ability to diagnose automotive problems through sound, smell, and observation. His mind processed mechanical systems as complete entities, seeing connections others missed. Later that evening, after the shop had closed, Marcus remained behind, working on a project Hank had granted him special permission to develop. In the back corner of the garage sat what most would see as junk, a salvaged engine block surrounded by an array of components from various vehicles. But Marcus saw potential. For months, he'd been building what Hank called his Frankenstein engine, a hybrid system incorporating his theories about recycled exhaust gases and specialized catalysts, the very concept Professor Winters had dismissed so harshly. Still at it? Hank asked, returning from locking the office. Almost have the recirculation timing synchronized, Marcus replied without looking up, his fingers making minute adjustments to a valve assembly. Hank watched in silence, marveling at the young man's focus. Your professors have any idea what you're capable of? Marcus tightened a final bolt before answering. They see what they expect to see. Their loss, Hank replied. But someday, someone's gonna see you, Marcus. Really see you. And everything's gonna change. Marcus smiled but didn't respond. In his experience, the world didn't work that way. Success required connections, resources, and opportunities that seemed perpetually out of reach for someone like him. He wiped his hands and gathered his textbooks. Tomorrow was Saturday, his longest shift at the garage, followed by an all-night study session for Monday's thermodynamics exam. No time for dreams or philosophical discussions about being seen. But as he left the garage, Marcus couldn't help glancing back at his creation, the embodiment of the idea Professor Winters had deemed impossible. It wasn't quite working yet, but it would. And when it did, perhaps then he'd have proof that his voice deserved to be heard, regardless of who tried to silence it. The following Wednesday brought torrential rain, turning Westfield's manicured campus into a sodden maze of puddles and hurried students. Marcus had just finished his electromagnetic theory class, standing in the back as usual, when the downpour intensified, forcing him to seek shelter under the engineering building's portico. That's when he saw it, a gleaming Rolls-Royce Ghost, its distinctive Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament barely visible through the rain, pulled haphazardly to the side of Campus Drive. Steam billowed from beneath its hood, mixing with the rainfall to create an otherworldly fog around the stranded luxury vehicle. Marcus watched as the driver's door swung open and a man emerged, clearly agitated. Even from a distance, his expensive suit and commanding presence marked him as someone unaccustomed to inconvenience. He barked into a phone while pacing beside the car, occasionally glancing at his watch. Under normal circumstances, Marcus would have hurried to his shift at Hank's. But something about the scene, perhaps the engineer in him curious about what could disable such a meticulously crafted machine, drew him closer. No, that's unacceptable. I can't wait 2 hours for roadside assistance, the man was saying, his voice carrying the unmistakable edge of someone used to immediate results. Do you have any idea who you're? Fine. Just find someone closer. As the man ended his call with visible frustration, Marcus approached cautiously. Car trouble? The man, mid-50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing gray eyes, gave Marcus a dismissive once-over. Nothing to concern yourself with. I'm an engineering student, Marcus offered. And I work as a mechanic. Maybe I can help. This is a Rolls-Royce Ghost, young man, not some Honda Civic, the man replied with thinly veiled condescension. It requires specialized expertise. Marcus stood his ground, rain soaking through his jacket. What are the symptoms? The man seemed ready to dismiss him again but instead sighed heavily. Overheating. Engine warning light. Loss of power before it stalled completely. Mind if I take a look? While you're waiting for that specialized expertise? Marcus asked, unable to keep a hint of challenge from his voice. After a moment's hesitation, the man nodded curtly and reached inside to pop the hood. Marcus approached the front of the vehicle, using his backpack as temporary shelter while he released the secondary hood latch. As the hood rose, his trained eyes immediately began scanning the immaculate engine compartment. Alexander Thornton, the man said unexpectedly, extending his hand after joining Marcus at the front of the car. Marcus froze momentarily, recognizing the name instantly. Alexander Thornton, the tech billionaire whose fellowship he declined to apply for just days ago. The man whose face regularly graced business magazines and whose company, Thornton Innovations, was revolutionizing renewable energy technology. Marcus Johnson, he replied, accepting the handshake while trying to hide his surprise. Thornton's assistant appeared from the passenger side, a polished woman in her 30s with an umbrella and a concerned expression. Mr. Thornton, the university president is expecting you in 15 minutes for the donor meeting. Clearly, I'll be delayed, Thornton replied tersely, turning back to Marcus. Well? Any insights, Mr. Johnson? Marcus focused on the engine, methodically checking connections and fluid levels. The coolant reservoir was full, belts appeared intact, and no visible leaks presented themselves. When did the problem start? He asked, reaching deeper into the engine compartment. About 10 minutes ago, approaching campus, Thornton replied, now watching with curiosity as Marcus worked. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree before everything shut down. Marcus nodded, his fingers finding what he suspected, a loose connection on the electronic control unit that regulated the Ghost's complex systems. But something else caught his attention, a slight modification to the factory setup that wouldn't be noticeable to anyone without intimate knowledge of these vehicles. Someone's been tinkering with the performance mapping, Marcus noted. Recently, by the look of it. Thornton's expression shifted from impatience to surprise. My personal mechanic made some adjustments last week. How could you possibly know that? The connection housing has tool marks that don't match factory installation, Marcus explained, pointing to nearly invisible scratches only a trained eye would notice. And there's residual adhesive from temporary sensor placement. For the first time, Thornton seemed genuinely impressed. You're more than just an engineering student, aren't you? Rain continued to pour around them as Marcus carefully traced the Rolls-Royce's electrical system. The loose connection was only a symptom, not the cause. His fingers moved with practiced precision, following the complex web of wires and control modules. The performance modifications created a conflict in the electrical system, Marcus explained. When the ECU tries to implement standard protective measures, it's receiving contradictory signals from the custom performance mapping. Thornton pulled out his phone. I need to call my mechanic. Already tried roadside assistance, his assistant reminded him. Not roadside. I need Sebastian, my personal mechanic. While Thornton made the call, Marcus continued his examination. The solution was relatively simple, but it required bypassing the conflicting signals without compromising the vehicle's sophisticated safety systems. Sebastian says it's impossible to diagnose without specialized equipment, Thornton reported after ending the call. He's sending a flatbed truck, but it won't arrive for at least 2 hours. Marcus straightened up. I can fix it now if you'd like. With what equipment? Thornton challenged. From his backpack, Marcus produced a small toolkit he always carried, basic tools augmented with a few custom devices he built himself at Hank's shop. You're going to fix a $250,000 vehicle with that? Thornton asked incredulously. The problem isn't mechanical, it's logical, Marcus explained. The car is getting confused by competing instructions. I just need to establish priority hierarchy in the system. Against his assistant's obvious reservations, Thornton gave a curt nod. Proceed. Marcus worked methodically, using a small device of his own creation to interface with the Rolls-Royce's electronic brain. His fingers flew over the connections with practiced ease, occasionally muttering calculations under his breath. 15 minutes later, he closed the hood. Try it now. Thornton looked skeptical but returned to the driver's seat and pressed the start button. The Ghost's engine came to life with a purr so quiet it was barely audible above the rainfall. The temperature gauge is normal, Thornton noted with undisguised surprise, checking the dashboard. Warning lights are clear. I've implemented a temporary fix, Marcus explained, rain dripping from his soaked clothing. It prioritizes factory safety protocols over the performance modifications. You should still have your mechanic properly integrate the custom mapping, but this will get you to your meeting. Thornton stepped out of the car, regarding Marcus with newfound respect. Where did you learn to do that? Self-taught, mostly, Marcus replied, packing away his tools. Working at Hank's auto shop helped. An auto shop taught you to interface with Rolls-Royce proprietary systems? No, Marcus admitted. I built the interface device myself. Been working on it for different vehicle systems. Thornton's expression changed from impressed to intensely curious. You built that? Mr. Johnson. Thornton called out as Marcus began walking away. A moment, please. Marcus turned, acutely aware of his soaked clothes and the growing lateness for his shift at Hank's. Sir. Get in, Thornton gestured to his now functioning Rolls-Royce. Let me drive you wherever you're headed. That's not necessary. It absolutely is, Thornton insisted. You just saved me from missing a $10 million donor meeting. The least I can do is keep you from pneumonia. Reluctantly, Marcus slid into the passenger seat of the Ghost, feeling immediately out of place among the handcrafted leather and polished wood. Thornton's assistant took the rear seat, still eyeing Marcus with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Where to? Thornton asked, putting the car in drive. Hank's auto shop on Maple Street, Marcus replied. I'm already late for my shift. As they pulled away from campus, Thornton studied Marcus with calculated interest. So you're an engineering student who works at a local garage, carries custom-built diagnostic equipment, and can fix a Rolls-Royce in the rain with tools that fit in a backpack. Interesting combination. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Just practical problem solving, sir. Diana, Thornton addressed his assistant, call Hank's auto shop. Explain that Marcus will be late because he's meeting with me. That's really not, Marcus began to protest. I insist, Thornton cut him off. And I'd like to know more about that interface device you built. For the next 15 minutes, as they drove through rain-slicked streets, Marcus explained his creation, a universal diagnostic tool designed to communicate with multiple vehicle systems regardless of manufacturer. Most garages spend thousands on proprietary equipment for different makes, Marcus explained. I designed this to be adaptable across platforms. It's still a prototype. Thornton listened intently. That has significant market potential. Have you patented it? Marcus laughed softly. Patents require money, Mr. Thornton. Alexander, please, Thornton corrected. And money can be arranged for innovations with promise. He paused thoughtfully. I'd like to offer you a position at Thornton Innovations. Our automotive division could use someone with your insight. The offer hung in the air as the Rolls-Royce glided to a stop outside Hank's auto shop. Through the window, Marcus could see Hank watching with undisguised curiosity. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to finish my degree," Marcus replied carefully. "Who says you can't do both?" Thornton countered. "Part-time work, flexible hours around your classes. Twice whatever you're making here, plus research resources for your projects." The offer was tempting, almost too perfect to be real. In Marcus's experience, opportunities like this came with hidden costs. "Why?" he asked directly. "You don't know me." Thornton smiled. "I know talent when I see it. And I know potential when it's demonstrated in 15 minutes of roadside genius." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card with his private number. "Think about it. Call me when you decide." As Marcus stepped out of the luxury vehicle, Thornton added, "Oh, and you should apply for the Thornton Innovation Fellowship. The selection committee would be impressed by that diagnostic tool." Inside the garage, Hank was waiting with folded arms and raised eyebrows. "Was that who I think it was?" Marcus nodded, still holding Thornton's card. "His rolls broke down near campus. And he gave you a ride because—" "Because I fixed it," Marcus replied, still processing the encounter. "And then he offered me a job." Hank's expression softened into something like pride. "What did I tell you? Someday someone was gonna see you." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Now get changed and tell me everything. Mrs. Peterson's Subaru isn't going to fix itself." As Marcus headed to the back room to change into dry clothes, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just shifted in some fundamental way. Alexander Thornton had seen him, really seen him, not as a black kid from the wrong side of town, but as an engineer with valuable skills. For the first time in months, the persistent pain in his back seemed less significant than the possibilities opening before him. A week after the Rolls-Royce incident, Marcus still hadn't called the number on Thornton's business card. The small rectangle of premium cardstock sat on his apartment desk, a constant reminder of possibility, and of his own hesitation. "You're overthinking this," Darius said, slouched on Marcus's worn couch while they reviewed thermodynamics problems. As Marcus's closest friend since freshman year, Darius had heard every detail of the Thornton encounter multiple times. "The man offered you a job with flexible hours and double pay. What's to think about?" Marcus winced as he shifted positions, his back especially painful after a long day of classes. "It feels too convenient. People like Alexander Thornton don't just offer jobs to random students who help them on the roadside. People like Alexander Thornton recognize talent when they see it," Darius countered, echoing Thornton's own words. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Professor Winters. The subject line made his stomach drop, "Failing performance in advanced engineering systems." "She's still coming after you?" Darius asked, noting Marcus's expression. Marcus opened the email, scanning its contents with growing dread. Professor Winters claimed his continued disruptive behavior of standing during lectures was creating a negative learning environment. She demanded he either sit properly or face academic consequences. "This is harassment," Darius stated flatly. "She causes your injury, then penalizes you for accommodating it." According to the university investigation, she didn't cause anything, Marcus reminded him bitterly. "Have you tried talking to the university's disability services?" Marcus nodded. "They require formal medical documentation from specialists I can't afford to see." He closed the email with a sigh. "And Professor Winters knows it." Later that afternoon, Marcus arrived at the engineering building 15 minutes early for Professor Winters' class, hoping to speak with her privately. He found her office door ajar. "Professor Winters," he called, knocking lightly. She looked up from her computer, her expression hardening upon recognizing him. "Mr. Johnson. Come to explain why you insist on disrupting my classroom?" "I wanted to discuss your email," Marcus said carefully. "I stand during lectures because sitting causes severe pain from my back injury." "An injury with remarkably convenient timing," she replied coldly. Without proper medical documentation, I see no reason to accommodate theatrical behavior designed to undermine my authority. It's not theatrical. Enough, she cut him off. Either sit like everyone else or find another class. I won't have you turning my lecture hall into a protest stage. Marcus felt heat rising in his face. This isn't about protest. It's about being able to learn without physical pain. Then I suggest better posture, she replied dismissively, turning back to her computer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to complete before class. During the lecture that followed, Marcus forced himself to sit, gritting his teeth through waves of pain that made concentrating nearly impossible. Halfway through, he had to leave, unable to endure it any longer. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, breathing heavily as pain radiated through his lower back. His phone buzzed, a message from his supervisor at Hanks asking if he could come in early. They were short-staffed, and a rush job had just arrived. The timing couldn't have been worse. Between Professor Winter's ultimatum, his deteriorating academic standing, mounting financial pressure, and his worsening back pain, Marcus felt walls closing in from every direction. As if summoned by his desperation, his gaze fell on his backpack where Thornton's business card peeked from a side pocket. The promise of flexible hours, better pay, and recognition of his talents suddenly seemed less like a suspicious opportunity and more like a necessary lifeline. With trembling fingers, partly from pain, partly from uncertainty, Marcus dialed the number. To his surprise, Thornton himself answered on the second ring. Alexander Thornton. Mr. Thornton, this is Marcus Johnson. We met last week when your Rolls-Royce broke down. There was a brief pause before Thornton's voice returned, noticeably warmer. Marcus. I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. Have you considered my offer? Taking a deep breath, Marcus made his decision. I'd like to discuss it further, if the opportunity is still available. Excellent, Thornton replied, and Marcus could hear the smile in his voice. How does tomorrow morning work for you? I'll send a car. The sleek black Tesla that arrived outside Marcus's apartment building the next morning drew curious stares from neighbors. Marcus, dressed in the best clothes he owned, dark slacks and a button-down shirt he'd ironed twice, felt both out of place and oddly determined as he slid into the back seat. Good morning, Mr. Johnson, the driver greeted him. Mr. Thornton is expecting you at Thornton Tower. The journey should take approximately 25 minutes. As they drove through progressively more affluent neighborhoods, Marcus rehearsed what he would say. He needed this opportunity but wanted to ensure his education remained the priority. More importantly, he needed to understand what Thornton really wanted from him. People didn't offer jobs to strangers without expecting something in return. Thornton Tower rose 48 stories above the city's financial district, its innovative curved glass design instantly recognizable against the skyline. The Tesla pulled into a private underground entrance where, to Marcus's surprise, Alexander Thornton himself waited. Marcus, Thornton greeted him with an outstretched hand. Glad you could make it. How's the Rolls running? Perfectly, I imagine, Marcus replied, shaking his hand. Though the modifications should be properly integrated by now. Indeed they have been. Sebastian was quite impressed by your temporary fix, Thornton said, leading Marcus toward a private elevator. He's been with me 15 years and rarely admits when someone else shows him up. The elevator whisked them upward with barely perceptible motion. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into what appeared to be an entire floor dedicated to research and development. Engineers and technicians worked at various stations, some huddled over complex machinery, others engaged with holographic design interfaces. Welcome to the Innovation Hub, Thornton announced with evident pride. This is where we develop concepts before they move to our production facilities. For the next hour, Thornton led Marcus through various departments, introducing him to key team members and explaining ongoing projects. Marcus recognized many innovations that had made headlines in recent years, from Thornton's revolutionary energy storage systems to their quantum computing breakthroughs. And this, Thornton said, stopping before a secured door, is our automotive division. Still relatively new, but growing rapidly. Inside, Marcus found himself in automotive engineering heaven. Advanced prototypes, cutting-edge diagnostic equipment, and a team of engineers working on what appeared to be next-generation electric vehicle systems. Dr. Chen, Thornton called to a woman examining engine schematics. "This is Marcus Johnson, the young man I mentioned." Dr. Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, approached with open curiosity. "So you're the mystery engineer who fixed Alexander's rolls with homemade equipment. I'd love to see this diagnostic tool you've developed." Somewhat self-consciously, Marcus withdrew his device from his backpack. Dr. Chen examined it with growing interest, asking pointed questions about its development and capabilities. "Impressive ingenuity," she concluded, returning it carefully. "Especially considering the limited resources you had available." "That's precisely why I invited Marcus here," Thornton interjected. "Imagine what he could create with proper backing." The tour concluded in Thornton's private office overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view that momentarily distracted Marcus from the conversation at hand. "So," Thornton said, settling behind his desk, "let's discuss your future, Marcus." "Before we do," Marcus replied, finding his voice. "I need to understand what exactly you're offering and why. With all due respect, Mr. Thornton, opportunities like this don't typically fall into the laps of people like me." Thornton's expression remained unreadable. "People like you?" "Scholarship students from community colleges who work at local garages," Marcus clarified, intentionally avoiding the racial dimension that lingered unspoken between them. "Let me be direct then," Thornton said, leaning forward. "I'm offering you 20 hours weekly at $50 per hour, flexible scheduling around your classes, access to our facilities for your projects, and mentorship from our engineering team." The salary figure, more than triple what Marcus earned at Hanks, nearly made him lose his composure. "As for why," Thornton continued, "I built this company by recognizing talent others overlooked. That device you created demonstrates precisely the kind of innovative thinking we value here." He paused, studying Marcus carefully. "Does that answer your question?" Marcus nodded slowly. "It does. And I accept, with one condition." Thornton raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "I need Tuesday and Thursday afternoons free for my advanced engineering systems class, even though the professor and I have a difficult relationship." "Professor Winters, I presume?" Thornton asked unexpectedly. Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "How did you know?" "I've been on Westfield's board of trustees for 15 years, Thornton replied with a slight smile. "I know Catherine Winters quite well. Brilliant engineer, terrible teacher." He waved his hand dismissively. "Consider your condition accepted. When can you start?" 3 weeks into his new position at Thornton Innovations, Marcus had settled into a rhythm that, while demanding, felt more sustainable than his previous schedule. Working 20 hours weekly in the automotive division gave him access to resources he'd only dreamed of, while the generous salary meant he could finally afford proper medical treatment for his back. Dr. Chen had taken him under her wing, incorporating his universal diagnostic tool into their development pipeline and assigning him to work on interface systems for their next-generation electric vehicles. For the first time since starting college, Marcus felt his talents were being recognized rather than dismissed. Even Professor Winters had become marginally more tolerable after Marcus received formal medical documentation of his condition. Though she remained cold, she no longer challenged his need to stand during lectures, a small victory that Darius attributed to rich people magic after learning of Marcus's connection to Thornton. He probably made one phone call, Darius had speculated. That's how the world really works. Whatever the reason, Marcus was grateful for the reprieve, focusing his energy on excelling both academically and professionally. Friday evening found him working late in the automotive lab, fine-tuning an adaptive interface for electric vehicle diagnostics. Most staff had departed for the weekend, but Marcus had permission to use the facilities whenever inspiration struck. "Still here," came Thornton's voice from the doorway. "It's nearly 8 o'clock." Marcus looked up, surprised. "Just finishing some adjustments to the EV interface. Dr. Chen wanted it ready for Monday's demonstration." Thornton nodded approvingly. She speaks highly of your contributions. Says you've revolutionized their approach to diagnostic systems. That's generous of her, Marcus replied, saving his work. The team here is incredible. Joining us for the division gathering? Thornton asked. Informal celebration on the 43rd floor. New contract with European markets. Marcus hesitated. Social events with executives still felt uncomfortable, but he recognized the networking value. I'll stop by briefly. The gathering was already underway when they arrived, perhaps 30 people engaged in animated conversations around a luxuriously catered spread. Marcus recognized most of the automotive division team alongside executives he'd met during his initial tour. As Thornton guided him through introductions, Marcus felt increasingly at ease. These were engineers first, executives second, people who spoke his language of innovation and problem-solving. Marcus designed the universal interface we're implementing in the European rollout, Thornton explained to a group of impressed board members. Developed the prototype while working at a local garage. As the conversation continued, Marcus noticed Thornton loosening his tie and unfastening his top button, a casual gesture that revealed something on the side of his neck. A tattoo, partially visible above his collar. Marcus froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. The marking, what little he could see of it, matched a design he'd seen only once before. A distinctive pattern of interconnected lines forming what looked like circuitry integrated with organic elements. The same design his mother had shown him in an old photograph, explaining it was his father's unique tattoo, a man who had disappeared before Marcus was born. A man whose name she'd refused to share, saying only that he'd chosen his ambitions over their family. Marcus? Are you all right? Thornton asked, noticing his sudden pallor. Fine, Marcus managed. Just remembered something urgent. Please excuse me. He retreated to a quiet hallway, heart pounding. The coincidence seemed impossible. Alexander Thornton, billionaire tech mogul and his new employer, sharing an identical tattoo with the father he'd never known. Marcus pulled out his phone, quickly searching for information about Thornton's early life. Most articles focused on his rise to prominence over the past 20 years, with little mention of his youth or family origins. One profile, however, noted that Thornton had grown up in modest circumstances in the same city where his corporate headquarters now stands, before attending MIT on scholarship in the early 1990s, timing that aligned perfectly with his mother's brief relationship with his father. Could it be possible? The thought seemed absurd, yet the distinctive tattoo was too unique to be coincidental. Marcus leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of the implications. If Alexander Thornton was his father, had Thornton recognized him somehow? Was that why he'd offered the job after their chance meeting? Or, more disturbing, had the meeting not been chance at all? Marcus's mind raced with questions as he watched Thornton through the doorway, laughing with colleagues, the edge of that distinctive tattoo just visible above his collar. A tattoo identical to the one in his mother's old photograph of the man who had abandoned them before Marcus was born. For 3 days following the revelation, Marcus avoided Thornton completely. He shifted his work schedule, arrived early, left late, and claimed urgent assignments whenever Thornton sought him out. The avoidance strategy couldn't last indefinitely, but it bought Marcus time to process his suspicions and decide how to proceed. On Wednesday evening, as Marcus worked alone in the automotive lab, a notification appeared on his workstation. Please see me in my office. At. The message's brevity left no room for excuses. With reluctance and determination in equal measure, Marcus took the private elevator to Thornton's executive floor. Thornton stood at the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, when Marcus entered. You've been avoiding me, he stated without turning. Yes, Marcus admitted, seeing no point in denial. May I ask why? Thornton finally faced him, his expression unreadable. Marcus hesitated, then decided directness was the only option. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Thornton gestured to the chairs facing his desk. Please. Instead of sitting, Marcus reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded photograph, one of the few personal items he kept with him at all times. He placed it on Thornton's desk, watching the older man's reaction carefully. The photograph showed a young woman, Marcus's mother, smiling beside a handsome man in his early 20s. The man's arm was around her shoulder, his head tilted toward hers in obvious affection. On his exposed neck, clearly visible, was the distinctive tattoo Marcus had glimpsed during the celebration. Thornton stared at the photograph, his composed facade crumbling as recognition dawned in his eyes. His hand moved unconsciously to his collar, fingers brushing the spot where the tattoo remained hidden. "Where did you get this?" he asked hoarsely. "That's my mother," Marcus replied evenly. "Alicia Johnson. The man next to her, the one with the tattoo identical to yours, is my father. A man I never met because he disappeared before I was born." Thornton sank into his chair, still staring at the photograph. "Alicia," he whispered. "My God, I haven't heard that name in 23 years, Marcus finished for him. "Approximately 9 months before I was born." A heavy silence filled the office as Thornton struggled to compose himself. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a mixture of shock, recognition, and something Marcus couldn't quite identify, perhaps regret. "You're Alicia's son," Thornton stated, no longer a question. "I'm asking if I'm your son," Marcus countered, his voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake of emotions beneath the surface. Thornton's gaze shifted between Marcus and the photograph, seeing the resemblance that had somehow escaped his notice before. The same determined set of the jaw. The same analytical eyes. "I didn't know," Thornton finally said. "Alicia never told me she was pregnant. We were so young, I was struggling through MIT on scholarship, working 3 jobs. When I received the offer to join the tech startup in California, I asked her to come with me." He paused, pain etching lines around his eyes. "She refused. Said I was choosing ambition over love. We argued. I left. And I never," his voice broke. "I never knew she was carrying my child." Marcus remained standing, processing this information. "So you didn't recognize me when we met? This wasn't some elaborate plan to find your long-lost son?" "No," Thornton replied definitively. "It was genuinely coincidence. I hired you because of your obvious talent." He looked up with sudden alarm. "Where is Alicia now?" "I should speak with her, explain." "She died," Marcus cut him off. "Cancer. 2 years ago." Thornton closed his eyes, absorbing this fresh blow. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I truly am." "Did you ever try to find her?" Marcus asked, the question that had haunted him his entire life. "Ever wonder what happened after you left?" "I did," Thornton admitted. "After my first company went public, I hired investigators. But Alicia had moved, changed her number. They found nothing." He gestured helplessly. "Eventually, I convinced myself it was better to leave the past buried." Marcus finally sat, legs no longer steady enough to support him. "So what happens now?" Thornton leaned forward, eyes suddenly intense. "That depends entirely on you, Marcus. I can't undo 22 years of absence. But if you're willing, I'd like the chance to know my son." The word son hung between them, strange and powerful and terrifying in its implications. "I don't know if I can do that," Marcus replied honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive 2 decades of absence that easily." "I wouldn't expect you to," Thornton assured him. "But perhaps we could start with transparency. DNA testing to confirm what we both already suspect, followed by, whatever feels right to you. No pressure. No expectations." Marcus studied the man across the desk, his biological father, yet a complete stranger. A billionaire who had built an empire while Marcus and his mother struggled to make rent. A man who had never known his son existed, yet whose absence had shaped every aspect of Marcus's life. "DNA testing," Marcus agreed finally. "And after that, we'll see." Thornton nodded solemnly. "That's more than fair." He hesitated, then added, "Regardless of what happens between us personally, your position here is secure. Your talent earned that, nothing else." As Marcus stood to leave, Thornton asked softly, was she happy, at least? Alicia? Marcus paused at the door, considering the question. She worked hard. Loved fiercely. Never spoke ill of you, even when I asked why I didn't have a father like other kids. He met Thornton's gaze directly. She always said you were brilliant but that you had different dreams. She never regretted keeping me, even when it meant sacrificing everything else. With those words hanging in the air between them, Marcus left, carrying the weight of a lifetime's questions answered and the uncertainty of what would come next. The DNA results arrived 2 weeks later, confirming what both men already knew: Alexander Thornton was, without question, Marcus's biological father. The clinical language of genetic markers and probability statistics somehow made the reality more concrete, transforming suspicion into irrefutable fact. They met in a quiet restaurant outside the city, neutral territory where both could speak freely away from corporate surroundings and academic pressures. The private dining room Thornton had reserved ensured their conversation would remain private. "I've been thinking about what to say to you," Thornton began after they'd ordered. Practiced speeches, explanations, apologies. None of them seem adequate. "I'm not looking for apologies," Marcus replied. "You didn't know about me. But I do want to understand who you were back then. The man my mother loved." Thornton nodded, seemingly relieved at the directness. "I was nobody. A scholarship kid from the wrong side of town with big ideas and bigger ambitions. Not unlike you." He smiled faintly. "I met Alicia during my second year at MIT. She was working at the campus bookstore, studying nursing part-time. The smartest, kindest person I'd ever met. She never finished her nursing degree," Marcus noted. "Had to work full-time after I was born." Guilt flashed across Thornton's face. "We dated for nearly 2 years. I was obsessed with my studies, developing the early concepts that would eventually become Thornton Innovations. When the opportunity came to join a tech startup in California, I saw it as my only chance to escape poverty." He paused, staring into his glass. "I asked Alicia to come with me. She said she couldn't leave her mother, who was ill at the time. We argued. I accused her of not believing in my dreams. She accused me of being selfish. And you left," Marcus finished. "I left," Thornton confirmed quietly. "Young, stupid, and convinced I was right. By the time I realized what I'd thrown away, it seemed too late to go back." "When did you get the tattoo?" Marcus asked, gesturing to Thornton's neck. Thornton's hand moved reflexively to cover it. "During our relationship. Alicia designed it, circuitry merged with organic elements. She said it represented how technology and humanity should coexist. I got it to show my commitment to that vision, and to her." Marcus absorbed this revelation. The tattoo that had haunted his childhood photographs was his mother's creation. A piece of her artistic vision that Thornton had carried all these years, even as he built an empire without her. "I did look for her," Thornton continued. "After my first company succeeded. Hired private investigators, searched records. But she'd moved, changed her name back to Johnson. The investigators found nothing." "She never hid," Marcus countered. "We lived in the same city your entire rise to success. Her name was in the phone book." Thornton looked genuinely pained. "The investigators I hired were clearly incompetent. Or perhaps I didn't push hard enough. Didn't want to disrupt the life I assumed she built without me." He met Marcus's gaze directly. "That's on me. Another failure I can never rectify." Their food arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the emotional weight of their conversation. After the server departed, Thornton reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. "I had my lawyers prepare this," he said, sliding it across the table. "It establishes a trust in your name. Education, housing, medical care, whatever you need. It can't make up for 22 years of absence, but it can ensure your future isn't limited by financial constraints." Marcus left the envelope untouched. "I'm not interested in your money." "I understand," Thornton replied. But it's there if you change your mind. No strings attached. As they ate, the conversation shifted to safer territory: Marcus's engineering projects, his innovations at Thornton Industries, his academic achievements despite obstacles. Gradually, the tension between them eased, replaced by the tentative connection of two minds that operated in remarkably similar ways. "You said my mother designed your tattoo," Marcus said as they finished their meal. "Did that influence your company's direction? The merger of technology and humanity?" Thornton appeared startled by the insight. "I never made that connection consciously, but, yes. The foundational philosophy of Thornton Innovations, technology that serves humanity rather than replacing it, that came from conversations with Alicia." He smiled sadly. "She always pushed back against my pure efficiency approaches, arguing that technology meaningless without human connection." "She would have been proud," Marcus admitted reluctantly. "Of what you built, I mean. Not of leaving." "No," Thornton agreed quietly. "She would have been right to condemn that choice. But perhaps prouder of you, achieving so much with so little support." As they prepared to leave, Thornton hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness, Marcus. Or even acceptance. But I'd like the chance to know you, not as my employee, but as my son. If you're willing." Marcus considered the man before him, the father he'd never known, the billionaire who had built an empire on ideas shaped by his mother, the flawed human who had made devastating mistakes of ambition and pride. "I don't know what that looks like," Marcus admitted. "But I'm willing to find out." 1 month after confirming their relationship, Marcus and Alexander sat in Dean Harrison's office at Westfield University. The meeting, requested by Thornton himself, had been scheduled with remarkable speed, the privilege of being the institution's largest donor. "Alexander, always good to see you," Dean Harrison greeted effusively before nodding curtly to Marcus. "Mr. Johnson." "Dean Harrison," Thornton replied, his tone professionally pleasant but notably cooler than the dean's. "Thank you for meeting with us on short notice. We have a matter of some urgency to discuss." The dean gestured to the chairs before his desk. "Of course, anything for our most distinguished benefactor." Once seated, Thornton placed a folder on the desk. "I've recently become aware of a disturbing situation involving Professor Catherine Winters and several students, most notably Marcus Johnson." Dean Harrison's smile faltered. "I believe that matter was thoroughly investigated and resolved months ago." "It was buried," Thornton corrected, opening the folder. "I've had my team conduct a proper investigation, including interviews with 17 students who witnessed Professor Winters physically assault Marcus, causing a back injury that continues to affect him today." The dean shifted uncomfortably. "Those allegations weren't substantiated, because no one contacted the witnesses," Thornton interrupted. "My investigators did. They also uncovered 7 additional complaints against Professor Winters over the past decade, all similarly dismissed without proper investigation." Marcus watched the dean's facade crumble as Thornton methodically presented evidence of the university's negligence. This meeting had been Thornton's idea, an offer of justice that Marcus had initially hesitated to accept, wary of special treatment. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Dean Harrison asked, his earlier warmth entirely evaporated. "I'm not suggesting anything," Thornton replied evenly. "I'm informing you that the university has 2 options. First, conduct a legitimate investigation into Professor Winters' behavior, with appropriate consequences and restitution to the students she's harmed. Second, prepare for a very public lawsuit and the immediate withdrawal of Thornton Innovations' financial support." The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. Without Thornton's donations, multiple university programs would collapse overnight. "Alexander, surely we can discuss this privately," the dean attempted. "There's no need to, Dean Harrison," Marcus interjected quietly. "All I ever wanted was acknowledgement of what happened and assurance it wouldn't happen to other students. The university denied me both." Thornton nodded approvingly before returning his attention to the dean. "You have until Friday to initiate a proper investigation. And Marcus's medical expenses for his back injury will be covered by the university, retroactively and going forward." As they left the administration building, Marcus felt a complex mixture of vindication and discomfort. Using financial leverage like that, it feels like exactly what I've always resented about privilege. Sometimes you have to work within a broken system to begin fixing it, Thornton replied thoughtfully. The investigation will help all students affected by Winters, not just you. 2 weeks later, the university announced Professor Winters had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of multiple allegations of misconduct. Marcus received formal written apologies from the dean and the board of trustees, along with confirmation that his medical expenses would be fully covered. More importantly, 5 other students came forward with similar experiences, finally feeling safe to speak out against a professor whose behavior had been protected by her research funding and connections. On a sunny Saturday morning, Marcus stood beside Thornton on the observation deck of Thornton Tower, gazing over the city that had always been home yet had often felt so unwelcoming. The university called, Marcus said. They want to create a scholarship fund for underrepresented students in engineering. Asked if I'd help design the program. Thornton smiled with genuine pride. Your mother would have loved that. The mention of Alicia no longer created instant tension between them. Instead, her memory had become a bridge, the one thing they had undeniably shared across the decades that had separated them. I've been thinking about your offer, Marcus said after a moment. The trust fund. It remains available whenever you're ready, Thornton assured him. I don't want it for myself, Marcus explained. But I'd like to establish a foundation in my mother's name. Supporting single parents pursuing education while raising children. Thornton's eyes brightened. The Alicia Johnson Foundation. It's perfect. As they stood side by side, father and son, separated for decades yet remarkably similar in ways neither could have imagined, Marcus realized something had shifted within him. The anger that had initially fueled his confrontation with Thornton had transformed into something more complex, understanding, if not yet forgiveness. We can't recover the years we lost, Marcus acknowledged. But perhaps we can build something worthwhile with the time we have now. Thornton placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the first such gesture between them. I'd like that very much. Below them, the city stretched out in all directions, the same city where a brilliant young student had once helped a billionaire with his broken Rolls-Royce, neither knowing how that chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The distinctive tattoo on Thornton's neck, the unexpected key that had unlocked their shared past, remained a visible reminder that sometimes, the connections we seek have been within reach all along, waiting only for the courage to recognize them. Dear friend, this story reminds us that talent and brilliance exist everywhere, regardless of race, background, or economic status. Too often, society overlooks exceptional individuals simply because they don't fit our preconceived notions of what success looks like. By challenging these biases and recognizing the potential in everyone we meet, we create a more just and innovative world for all. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to support more content that bridges divides and celebrates the unexpected connections that make us human. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter.